At 8,000 meters, your brain begins to swell, your muscles waste away, and every step hastens your own decline. Yet climbers are still lining up in record numbers to enter this place. More than 300 people have died here, and almost 4 in 10 never make it back from these heights. Why, after a century of warnings, does the world's most dangerous zone keep claiming new victims? What drives ordinary people and legends to cross a line where survival has a time limit? In June 1924, two British climbers, George Mallory and Andrew Irvine, set out from their high camp on Everest's northeast ridge, aiming for a summit no one had ever reached. The equipment they carried was little more than tweed jackets and hobnail boots, with no radios and no supplemental oxygen reliable enough for the task. As clouds gathered over the world's highest slopes, the pair vanished into the mist, last glimpse just below the summit before the mountain swallowed them whole. Their disappearance stunned the climbing world and left a question that still lingers. Did they stand on the top, or did the mountain defeat them within sight of their goal? For days, search parties scanned the slopes, but found only an ice axe, no sign of life, no bodies to bring home. The risks were uncharted, the dangers invisible until it was too late. In an era before the term death zone even existed, Mallory and Irvine's story exposed the reality that above a certain height, luck and endurance offer no guarantees. Their loss would haunt Everest for decades, a silent warning that in this place, ambition alone cannot keep a climber alive. The phrase death zone did not come from legend or folklore. In 1952, Swiss physician and expedition leader Edouard Wyss-Dunant stood with his team high on Everest's flanks and named this invisible boundary, the point above which the body cannot adapt and can only survive. A year later, in the Journal of the Swiss Foundation for Alpine Research, he described the Todt Zone, a band of altitude starting around 7,800 meters and stretching beyond 8,600 meters, where recuperation is impossible and survival is the only term suitable for describing the behavior of a man in that mortal zone. By the time Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay reached Everest's summit in 1953, the dangers Wyss-Dunant outlined had become reality. Their ascent, powered by supplemental oxygen and careful planning, proved that the summit could be reached, but only by acknowledging the limits science had defined. In the decades that followed, climbers like Babuchiri Sherpa pushed those boundaries, spending 21 hours on Everest's summit without bottled oxygen, a feat that remains unmatched. Yet even these achievements did not erase the warning Wyss-Dunant had issued. Above 8,000 meters, every minute is borrowed time. The death zone is not a test of willpower or strength alone. It is a line drawn by biology, one that every climber must respect. In the spring of 2019, Everest's upper slopes turned into a human gridlock. The Nepalese government issued 381 climbing permits that season, more than ever before. As storms closed most of May, nearly every team waited for the same narrow window to make a summit attempt. On May 22nd and 23rd, over 200 climbers, plus their Sherpa guides, crowded the fixed ropes above 8,500 meters. The line stretched from the south summit across the Cornice Traverse, winding up to the Hillary Step, a single file queue, each person clipped to the same rope, inching forward in air so thin that every breath felt like drowning. A composite climber, let us call her Maya, found herself stuck for nearly 2 hours, motionless on a knife-edge ridge. Ahead and behind, boots scraped ice as dozens waited their turn to pass a narrow rock outcrop. The ridge offered no shelter, only a 1,000-meter drop on either side. With each minute, Maya's oxygen canister ticked lower. The cold seeped in. She watched as a Sherpa guide checked a client's mask, then urged patience. There was nowhere to go. A summit push that should have taken 8 hours stretched to 12, even 14, as climbers waited for the rope to clear. Some ran out of supplemental oxygen before reaching the top. Others lost strength standing still, unable to generate heat. That season, 11 people died on Everest. Doctors and guides later connected several of those deaths to the hours-long delays in the death zone, where a traffic jam can turn a climb into a fight for survival. Permit numbers keep rising, but the mountain's narrow ridges cannot be widened. Each new season brings more pressure to the same exposed line, and with it, more risk. The descent from the summit is where the mountain claims most of its victims. Climbers who have spent hours in the death zone, often far longer than planned, find themselves at their weakest just as the hardest work begins. Oxygen supplies run low or run out entirely, leaving bodies starved for air. Muscles that carried them to the top now tremble with fatigue, and minds clouded by hypoxia struggle to make simple decisions. Each step downward demands focus, but exhaustion and thin air dull reaction times. On narrow ridges and icy slopes, a single misstep can mean a fall of thousands of meters. Crowds compound the risk. When dozens of climbers are forced to wait their turn on a fixed rope, delays stretch for hours. The longer they linger above 8,000 meters, the more their bodies break down. Some collapse where they stand, unable to move another step. Others lose their way in the whiteout of confusion that comes with oxygen deprivation. Above this height, rescue is almost always impossible. Helicopters cannot fly in such thin air, and even the strongest Sherpa guides cannot carry an unconscious climber down for long. More than 330 climbers have died on Mount Everest, and nearly 40% of those deaths have occurred in the death zone, most on the way down. The bodies that remain are a stark reminder. In this place, turning back is often more dangerous than pushing on. The descent is not a victory lap. It is a final, deadly test that few ever forget, and some never survive. Above 8,000 meters, the air holds just 30 to 33% of the oxygen found at sea level. Each breath delivers so little that, even at rest, the body's oxygen saturation, measured as SpO2, can plunge below 70%. At this threshold, basic functions start to fail. The brain swells with fluid, a condition called high-altitude cerebral edema, known as HACE. Lungs can flood from high-altitude pulmonary edema, known as HAPE. Simple movements become exhausting, judgment slips, and reaction times slow. Climbers who linger here face a hard deadline. With supplemental oxygen, survival is measured in hours, and most experts warn not to exceed 16 to 20 hours. Even the strongest are not immune. Sherpas, who fix ropes, carry loads, and often lead the way for others, face repeated crossings through this zone each season. Their resilience is legendary, but risk is cumulative. Since records began, at least 129 Sherpas have died on Everest, many while working above the 8,000-meter line. The death zone does not discriminate. Every body is on borrowed time. Glaciers that once anchored Everest's climbing routes are thinning fast. The Khumbu icefall, already infamous for its shifting towers of ice, now loses up to 15 meters of thickness a year. Warmer spring temperatures have pushed avalanche risk up by nearly 30% since 2000. On the summit ridge, permafrost is thawing. Rock and ice that held steady for generations now break loose with little warning, turning once reliable passages into hazards. In 2014, a single collapse in the icefall killed 16 Sherpas, an event tied to accelerated melt. These changes force more rerouting each season, exposing climbers and guides to longer, riskier crossings. Some guides and scientists warn that without stronger rules, these dangers will only grow. Proposals include capping the number of climbing permits, setting strict experience requirements, and recognizing the vital role of Sherpa labor. Yet every spring, hundreds more permits are issued, even as the mountain's foundation grows less stable. The question now is not whether Everest can be made safe, but whether policy will catch up before the next disaster. Today, more climbers are drawn to these heights than ever, despite the known risks. As the line between ambition and survival blurs, the death zone exposes how little room nature leaves for error. Here, every step is a